met Mark because the city is expensive and loneliness eats money. He posted a photo of a sunny living room and a figure that was supposed to be him, out of focus, holding a mug. The caption said, "Quiet. Neat. Split utilities. No drama, I like that. I didn't want a new best friend. I wanted a clean sink and a lock that clicked." The place was a second-floor apartment above a hair salon that always smelled faintly of burnt sugar and hairspray. The hallway was narrow, faded red carpet, and one of those glass blocks in the stairwell that let in a lot of light but no view. The door to our unit stuck on humid days. I had to put my shoulder into it, which felt like breaking into my own life. He shook my hand the first day I toured. His grip was calm. He had a steady way of standing, like he always knew where his feet were. Dark hair, clean shave, not handsome, not ugly, neat. There was nothing to read on his face. His eyes met mine and then rested. He wore a gray t-shirt tucked into black jeans with a belt, like he was about to give a presentation no one else was invited to. "I like quiet," he said as we stepped into the living room. "I work nights sometimes." "You?" "Quiet is good," I said. "I work from home. Headphones. I cook, but not much. I clean up after myself." He nodded at the kitchen. "Gas stove. The oven runs hot. The fridge is mine, but I labeled shelves. You can have the middle. No shoes in the apartment. Bathroom door sticks if you pull hard, so push. I change the AC filter every month." He said it all like facts from a manual. I liked that even more. No jokes I had to laugh at. He moved like a cat through the rooms, opening and closing with care. My bedroom was small with a window that faced a brick wall. I imagined my bed there, my bookshelf there, my shirts folded straight. "You can move in next week," he said, "if you want it." I signed that night. My old place smelled like wet towels, and my neighbor played the same sad playlist every Sunday. I wanted out. I wanted the sound of my own key. The day I moved in, he stood in the doorway with a clipboard and checked off each box I brought. It would have been annoying if it wasn't weirdly comforting. It felt like landing with a pilot who took the safety cards seriously. I set my boxes against the wall and he said, "Shoes," and pointed to the mat, and I apologized and slipped them off. He nodded and put a small check next to House Rules Explained. That first week was clean. He was careful. He stacked plates like a librarian stacks rare books, edge to edge, no clatter. He never left anything out, no socks, no coins, no hair in the shower. He washed the sink after brushing his teeth. His toothbrush went in a drawer every time. He never asked me anything beyond how's work. He never told stories. I didn't either. We weren't friends. We were orbiting objects, and I liked the distance. I first noticed the smell on a Tuesday. It was faint, not garbage or mold. Something heavy, sweet and spoiled at the same time, like the inside of an old freezer that just shut off. It seemed to come from the hallway by his room. I paused, breathed in, and it went away. I told myself it was the salon downstairs, some chemical I wasn't used to. That night, the smell was gone. On Wednesday, I heard a thud around the time I usually make coffee. A deep, soft impact like a bag of flour dropped on a carpet. I froze with the kettle in my hand. No follow-up sound. No footsteps. A minute later, the bathroom faucet ran hard and then stopped. I poured water over the grounds and told myself the thud was the door sticking again. I told myself he had dropped a box. None of my business. We fell into a routine. I made coffee and worked at the little table by the window. He left early, came back late. He didn't cook. He ate things that didn't leave smells. Hard-boiled eggs, apples, cold chicken. Sometimes I heard his bedroom door open and close in the night. Once I woke to the distinct sound of something dragging against the floor, a slow scrape, then silence. I sat up, heart bouncing. The sound didn't come again. I lay back down and waited for morning. You know, the kind of silence that isn't quiet, like a held breath. The apartment began to feel like that. It wasn't anything I could point to. It was the way he stood in the kitchen and watched the kettle, his hands flat on the counter. It was the way he angled his head when I spoke, as if checking for static. He never raised his voice. He never turned on the TV. He read manuals at the table. How to install something, how to troubleshoot, how to care for leather belts. He didn't own a pet, but he had a hardcover book about grooming dogs. He didn't have a car, but he kept a car manual in his room. One night, I came home with a headache. The hallway light was out. Our door was cracked open. That was unusual. He never left anything open. I stood there with my key in my hand and listened. The living room was dark except for the street light coming through the blinds, casting clean lines across the rug. I pushed the door gently, and it whispered against the frame. Inside, the heaviness hit me again. That freezer sweet, the weight of it. I swallowed against the rising bile and didn't call out his name. I don't know why. Maybe I did. Maybe my mouth made the shape. My throat didn't cooperate. The smell wasn't everywhere. It was a vein of air running down the hall. I set my bag down like a thief, careful not to make noise. My bedroom door was closed and I went in and locked it. I sat on the floor with my back against the bed and the room tilted slowly. I inhaled through my t-shirt and stared at the shadow under my door. The hall light came on. Soft footsteps passed. Then the light went off. He didn't knock. He didn't say anything. After a while, I heard the bathroom fan and water. That sound was normal enough that I got up and turned on my lamp. Later, he knocked on my door in a polite rhythm. I opened it. He stood with a bottle of cleaner. "Sorry about the smell," he said. "I spilled something. I'll take care of it." "What did you spill?" I asked. "Meat," he said. "I had a package of meat I forgot about. It leaked. It's in a bag now." He gestured toward the kitchen trash. "I'll take it out in a minute." "That's okay," I said. I figured it was the salon. They use weird stuff. "They do," he said. "You can smell it in the pipes." He looked at my shoes. I wasn't wearing any. He looked at the bottle in his hand like he'd just remembered it. "I'll clean up." He did. He wiped down the floorboards and the base of his door and the corner of the hall like a man erasing pencil marks. He took the trash out. The air flattened back to its old smell. Dust, detergent, a faint apple from the dish soap. I slept with my bedroom window cracked, even though it faced the brick wall. In the morning, the sun made a rectangle on my floor, and that felt like something you could trust. 2 weeks in, he asked if my parents ever visited. It was his first personal question. He asked it while washing a fork. "Not really," I said. "They live far. We talk on the phone." He nodded. "Do you have friends over?" "Sometimes," I lied. I hadn't had anyone over yet. It felt like bringing a loud object into a museum. Do you? No, he said, and smiled at the fork. I like it quiet. I told myself it was good. He wasn't nosy. He wasn't messy. He paid rent on time. He left notes stuck to the fridge with a small piece of tape. The notes were precise. I'll be using the kitchen from 6 to 7, or don't run the dishwasher tonight. And I respected the boundaries even when I didn't need to. It made things smooth. Rules make things simple. You don't have to guess. Then the packages started. Every few days, a box arrived. Plain cardboard, no logo, taped clean. He never left them out. He opened them in his room. I only saw what he carried past. Folded brown paper, a glint of something metallic wrapped in bubble wrap, bags with labels printed in all caps, polypropylene rope, stain remover, silica gel. The rope label made me snort in the kitchen because it was such a normal thing to order, and also such a weird thing to see written big like that. When he came out again, he saw the smile still on my face and tilted his head. Good rope, he said. Doesn't rot. Cool, I said. I wanted to ask what he needed it for. I didn't. He dried his hands with a towel and folded the towel into a small square and set it down like an offering. The next box was heavier. He carried it in with a grunt and didn't disguise the sound. I heard the drag again, not in the night this time, but at noon. A slow, patient movement of weight across carpet. Then a pause. Then the soft closing of a door. Then his shower. It wouldn't have bothered me if not for the cadence of it. The patience. The silence between. It felt like someone counting in their head. It felt like someone humming without the music. I started leaving the house more. I told myself I liked walking. I went to the park with a coffee and watched people with dogs. I watched the dogs watch the squirrels. I watched the squirrels pretend not to see them, tails flicking. I stayed until my cup was empty, and then threw it away and stood in the sun a little longer, letting my shirt warm my back, thinking about nothing. When I went home, the air would be clear, and Mark would be reading at the table, and I would nod at him, and he would nod back, and we would be fine. Then one morning, the elevator was out, and I took the stairs and passed the open back door of the salon. 2 women in smocks stood by the trash cans smoking. A box sat between them, taped, with a shipping label to somewhere a few neighborhoods over. One of the women laughed and said, "You ever smell something and it just goes straight into your teeth?" They noticed me and went quiet. I gave a little smile and kept walking. That phrase stuck, though. I couldn't shake it. It's exactly what the apartment air had felt like, that one night. A smell that went inside you and understood your mouth better than you did. That afternoon, the building's super knocked. Mark opened. I was at the table, and the super could see me over Mark's shoulder. He said they were checking smoke detectors. He was a small man with a permanent shrug to his shoulders, as if bracing for cold. He stepped in with a stepladder and an aerosol can. Mark stood to the side and watched him go from detector to detector, spraying and pressing, making each little device scream, and then shut up. "Everything good?" the super asked as he lowered the ladder. "Any leaks? Smells?" "No," Mark said. "All good." The super looked at me. "All good?" "Yep," I said, even as a sour note teased the back of my throat. Maybe he smelled it too, because his eyes flicked down the hall toward Mark's door. "Any problems?" he said. "You call me." The number is on the board downstairs." He left, carrying the ladder like a folded spine. Mark shut the door and turned the deadbolt twice. "You don't need to lock it," I said without thinking. "It's daytime." "I like to be consistent," he said. His face didn't change. The dead body was in his closet. I'll say it now because I didn't say it then. I didn't even let myself say it in my head. I found it by accident, which is to say I didn't want to find anything at all. A week later, laundry day. We had a shared hamper in the hall closet, the kind with 2 canvas bags in a metal frame, his bag and mine. I pulled my bag out and it ripped. The metal hook at the top bent. I stared at the crease in the frame like it was a broken bone I had somehow caused by looking at it. I held the limp bag and said, "Shit." He wasn't home. It was Saturday, and he had errands, which is what he called whatever he did. He never left a trace of where he'd been. I told myself I'd fix the hook with pliers. I told myself I knew where he kept tools because he was the sort of man who kept a labeled toolbox. I opened the hall closet. No toolbox. Mops, vacuum, the filter boxes, the vacuum hose like a snake. No toolbox. His door wasn't locked. It never was. That was one of our rules that we never said. We didn't go into each other's rooms, not because we couldn't, but because we shouldn't. A boundary is stronger when it's a choice. I put my hand on his doorknob and didn't turn it. I dropped my hand and stood there, laundry bag in my other arm like a flag of surrender. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, felt stupid, turned the knob, and walked in. His room was cool. The blinds were closed, but not tightly. Light came in thin lines, enough to see everything and not much of it at once. Bed made tight, a chair with no clothes on it, a desk with no papers. The smell wasn't strong here. It was behind another door, the closet. I told myself I'd be quick. I'd find the toolbox. I'd fix the hook. I'd leave. I slid the closet door open with 2 fingers like I was opening a curtain to a stranger's play. The toolbox sat on the floor to the right, a red metal box with a silver latch. On top of it, a coiled length of that same rope, neat loops trusted not to tangle. There was a plastic garment bag hanging in front of me, the kind dry cleaners use, only thicker. Behind it, on the floor, was a black duffel with its zipper half open. I told myself not to look. I looked. It was a hand, gray at the knuckles, bent in a loose fist, as if keeping a small object I couldn't see. The skin looked like a glove someone had worn in water and left to dry wrong. The nails were clean, a pale ribbon of something. Cloth? Tape? Cut under the wrist and disappeared into the dark of the bag. I closed the closet. I felt the weight of the door like the weight of a coffin lid. I stood very still, feeling every pore on my face open. The closet, the rope, the hand, none of it made a sound. My breath did. I could hear the ragged way I pulled it in and pushed it out, and the fact of that sound made me want to hold my breath, like I was about to dive. I bent and picked up the toolbox because I had to leave with something. I couldn't walk out empty-handed like I had only been breathing. In the living room, I set the toolbox on the table next to the broken laundry bag. I had the sense to fix the hook. That part is stupid, I know, but I did it. I used the pliers to straighten the metal and crimp the torn edge, and it held like it had never broken. I folded the bag back into the frame. I put the toolbox back in his room, opening and closing doors with a care that made my fingers shake. I washed my hands twice, though they weren't dirty. I stood in the kitchen and poured a glass of water and didn't drink it. Then I left. I walked. I was the only person walking without a destination. Everyone else had places to be, shoulders trained toward their next thing. I kept moving for the sake of movement. I thought if I stopped, I would start making sounds I couldn't control. I turned down a block with a cafe and went in. I ordered tea and pretended to read something on my phone. The words were just shapes. I looked up and watched people talk to each other. Their mouths moved and their hands moved, and they nodded at what the other said. And for a second, the ordinary miracle of that broke me open. I realized how much of life is agreeing about what's in front of you. A cup, a wall, a hand. When I finally went home, I told myself a story. It was a prop hand. It was fake. Mark was weird. He ordered rope and manuals and fake hands. He had a hobby. Maybe he did special effects. Maybe he was a magician. Maybe the hand had fooled me because it was good. Because I had wanted to be fooled. Because my brain was looking for something that matched the smell and the drag and the packages, and the way he watched the kettle and the blank way he smiled. I told myself something no one even asked me to believe. I am wrong. I want to be wrong. I'll be wrong louder than anyone. He was in the kitchen when I got back. He was making tea. The kettle hissed. The apartment was clean and bright. He looked up at me and said, "Hey." His eyes dropped to my hand. I still had a faint red pinch mark across my fingers from the pliers. He noticed that, and nothing else. "You fixed the thing?" I could have said, "What thing?" I could have tested whether he knew what I had touched. I heard my voice say, "Yeah." The hook was bent. "It's good now." "Thanks," he said. I couldn't find the toolbox earlier. "Me neither," I said and swallowed. But then I did. He stared at me, not suspicious, just flat, like a spoon left on the counter. "Good," he said. He poured hot water and the steam came up in a clean column. "I'm cooking later. I'll need the stove for a bit." "What are you making?" I asked. "Because I'm stupid. Because that's what you say when someone says they're cooking." "Stew," he said. "I like to let it simmer." I went to my room and sat on the bed and put my face in my hands. I told myself to call the police. I told myself to walk into a station and say, "I think my roommate has a body in his closet." I pictured their faces when I said it. I pictured the pause and the slow questions. "Are you sure? Did you see it? How do you know it wasn't fake? Do you have proof?" I pictured Mark standing at the kitchen table reading a manual about home wiring and thought about how quiet he could be when he moved, how very quiet he could be. I thought about the door that stuck, about having to put my shoulder into it. I told myself to leave, pack a bag and go, sleep at a friend's. I didn't go. I was a person in a hot room looking at a closed window. That night, he cooked. He put a pot on the front burner and filled it with water. He took out plastic containers from the fridge and lined them up like soldiers. Onions, carrots, meat, which he cut into cubes with a steady hand, wiping the knife after each cut. The smell that rose at first was normal. Onions sweating, garlic blooming. Then something else threaded through, a note that didn't belong with food. My throat tried to close. I put on my shoes, breaking the rule, and walked to the bodega on the corner to buy milk I didn't need. I took the long way back, past the laundromat, past the hardware store with the dusty box fans in the window, past the bus stop where a woman in a suit jacket smoked with one hand and typed with the other. When I came back and opened the door, the smell was clean again. The window over the stove was open. The pot was covered. He sat at the table with a bowl and a spoon. He looked at my feet. I took off my shoes. He didn't say anything about it. "Want some?" he asked, nodding at the pot. The spoon hovered over his bowl, unmoving. "I already ate," I lied. "Okay," he said, and went back to eating. His jaws moved the same way they did when he read. Calm, even. No one should chew calmly. My own teeth felt like objects I had been loaned. That night, I dreamed I was back in his closet. In the dream, the hand in the bag opened and held up a small key. I woke up with my own hand curled, empty. The room was hot and I had kicked my blanket off. In the hall, a floorboard creaked. I froze. The door handle didn't turn. After a minute, I heard the soft slide of something against wood. The scrape stopped at the base of my door. I held my breath until black spots crept in at the edges of my vision. The scrape moved again, away, as if whatever it was had changed its mind. I counted to 100 and still didn't move. Eventually, like a bad lifeguard, sleep dragged me under again. A few days later, the building got a new face. A woman named Talia moved into 2A down the hall. I met her on the stairs, carrying a plant with long, pale leaves splayed like fingers. She smiled with her whole mouth. She had a small scar on her temple that flashed when she turned her head. We did the neighbor thing. She said, "If you ever need a cup of sugar," and laughed at her own cliché, and then said, "No, really, I like baking." Her apartment door stuck too. She rolled her eyes and said, "I'm going to kick it down one day." Mark watched us talk from our doorway. He leaned his shoulder against the frame and didn't smile. When I introduced him, he held out his hand. Talia took it. He didn't squeeze hard. Her plant brushed his sleeve and he stepped back like it had bitten him. That night, there was a note on our fridge. "Please do not invite anyone over this week. Project in progress. Thank you." Under it, there was a strip of tape to keep the note perfectly flat. I read it 3 times and felt my scalp tighten as if my hair was bracing itself. He started working in the kitchen late. The knives came out. The ropes came out. Not on the table. Never messy like that. But he moved with a purpose I could feel even when I couldn't see it. I sat in my room and listened to the soft sound of drawers opening, the soft clack of a cutting board being set down, the steady rhythm of something measured. He wasn't careless. He didn't hum. The TV was never on. My laptop screen reflected my own face back at me like a scold. The second murder didn't belong to us. Not at first. I saw it on my phone while standing in line for coffee. A headline. A photo of a closed-off alley with police tape and a figure bending, blue gloves bright. There had been one a few weeks before, in a different part of the city. The new article said the word "connected," like a rumor it had permission to pass on. I locked my phone and unlocked it, and read the first paragraph twice. The place names meant nothing to me. I had never been there. My stomach went cold in the type of way that doesn't warm back up when you step into the sun. When I got home, Mark was sewing. He did it at the table. A small needle, clean thread, a careful attitude at odds with the thing itself. He was patching a strap on a duffel bag with a curved suture needle. It was the kind people use for stitches. I knew that because I had seen that entire suture kit, new in a clear box, in the trash the week before. And then I had found it gone when I emptied the trash later, as if the trash had given it back. "Where'd you get that needle?" I asked, not casual. "Online," he said, then glanced at my face, then at the bag, then back at me. "It's good for heavy fabric." "Looks like it," I said. I put my keys in the bowl by the door without looking away from him, as if my eyes could anchor me to the ground. "I'm meeting a friend later," I lied again. "We might come back here after." "Not this week," he said, without looking up. "Project." "What project?" I asked, and I hated how my voice skated on those words. "Organizing," he said. "Tools. Storage. The closet." He slid the needle through with that same calm, even pressure he used on everything. The bag took it without complaint. It's better if there's a system. You know? He looked up then. His eyes were colorless in the light. Systems keep the noise down. I nodded. My throat worked but didn't produce words. He smiled, a thin slice that didn't reveal teeth. "You understand," he said, like a teacher closing a book. "You're good at quiet." I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back and let my mind do what it wanted to do, which is to say it ran. I pictured the hand in the duffel opening again and letting go of the small key, and the key fell through the floorboards into the salon, and one of the women in smocks picked it up and looked at it and said, "This is from upstairs." And then everyone looked up at me. The mind is a stupid movie studio. I would have paid any amount of money to be the kind of person who could ignore the soundtrack. At 3 or 4 or something like that, I won't pretend I was looking at the time, I heard the stairwell door below us creak. Footsteps up the stairs. Our door unlocked. He came in like he always did, soundless and final. I lay still. The hallway floorboard near his room protested. The kitchen faucet ran for a second. A cabinet door opened, closed. Then I heard something I'd never heard before. A faint, almost happy exhale. Not a laugh, not content. More like a satisfied note you make when you find a puzzle piece in the couch cushions. A small sound of completion. He made it as he passed my door. The next morning, his note was gone. The tape had left a clean stripe on the fridge like a tan line. He was already dressed when I came out. His t-shirt tucked like always, hair neat. He carried a mug that might have been empty. "I'm going to take a trip," he said. "I'll be back tomorrow night." "Okay," I said. The air felt different, a subtle lack, like the pause after a held breath. "Want me to water anything?" He looked at the plants on the windowsill as if seeing them for the first time. No. After he left, I locked the door. I deadbolted it. I leaned a chair under the handle, like in movies, which I knew was pointless, but I did it anyway. I paced the living room. I sat at the table and opened my laptop and searched for words I didn't want to search for. I read articles I shouldn't have read. The victims were different and the same. The descriptions were the same and different. The phrases blurred. Blunt force, ligature, postmortem, unidentified. Unidentified did something to me. I shut the laptop too hard. I called a friend. I thought telling someone would make the thing real enough to take care of itself. I said his name and paused. I said, "I think something is wrong in my apartment." I didn't say body. I didn't say hand. The friend asked the question you're supposed to ask. Are you safe? I said, I think so, which was both true and useless. He said, do you want to come stay with me? I looked around my room at my things, my poor small things, and said soon. Maybe I was choosing between a fire and a map of it. That afternoon, the super was back in the hall replacing the broken light. He balanced on the top step of his ladder and held the new fixture in his elbow while twisting the wires. Light's been out, he said to me without looking down. Makes people nervous. Yeah, I said. Hey, do you have cameras in the building? He snorted softly, which is a strange sound to make on a ladder. Cameras? No. People don't want cameras. They want to pretend nobody sees them. My hands felt useless at my sides. If there was a problem. You call the police, he said. They come. They do what they do. He set the fixture, clicked it on, and the hall became a place again instead of a tube. He looked at me then. You having a problem? I opened my mouth. I saw in a flash what it would be like to drag him into my apartment and open Mark's closet and pull open the duffel and stand back, my hands up, like a witness coming clean. I saw what might happen if the duffel was empty. I saw what might happen if it wasn't. The super waited. I said, my door sticks. And he laughed, a small puff, and said, they all do, and went back to his ladder. That night I slept at Talia's. I knocked on her door with my backpack on and said, this is a lot to ask. And she said, no, it isn't, and moved aside. Her place was still half in boxes. She handed me a blanket and pointed to the couch and said, I have tea. And I wanted to cry at the normalcy of it, so I didn't. We watched a show where nothing bad happens, and people work together to fix things. She didn't ask me questions. I told her plant looked good in that corner. She said it liked the light. I was almost asleep when she said, with her eyes on the TV, your roommate gives me the creeps. The word creeps is cheap, I know that, but it was the right word. It described the sensation without pretending to diagnose it. He's neat, I said. It was the best I could do. Neat people can be creepy, she said. She turned the volume down. He looked at my plant like it offended him. We both laughed, and it felt like relief poured into a body shape. In the morning, I checked my phone and had a text from an unknown number. This is Mark. I went early. Back tonight, I hadn't given him my number. That told me something small and terrible. I tried to tell myself he could have found it on the lease, or in an email on the open laptop in the living room if I was careless once, or in the Wi-Fi account info. He had a way of finding things that made you feel like you had handed them to him. I went home after lunch. I didn't tell Talia why. I didn't tell myself either. Our door opened easily, like it wanted me there. The apartment felt vacant, the way a staged house feels. Cushions placed, no dent from someone's weight. The smell didn't punch at me. It was cleaner than that. It hung like a memory you disagree with. I stood in the hall and looked at his door. The air was still. A fly hit the window twice, and then gave up and walked the glass. My hand was on the knob before I made the decision to put it there. When I opened his closet this time, my heart didn't speed. That scared me. Fear had a speed, and I had gotten used to it. The new slow was worse. The duffel was gone. The rope was gone. The garment bag hung like a question. The toolbox sat where I had left it. In the corner, a new plastic bin had appeared, clear with a white lid, labeled in black marker, Winter. Inside, something heavy and folded. A coat, a blanket, something with thickness. On top of that, a pair of gloves, fingers stretched as if recently removed. The gloves were the wrong season. They were the wrong season in a box labeled for the season. The label made me dizzy for its neatness. I slid the closet shut. Back in the living room, I noticed a square of floor that had been cleaned more than the rest. In strong light, you can see where a mop turned. There was a faint border around the square, like a patch. I crouched and touched the surface. It was smooth, a little tacky, not carpet tile. Tile under a rug under carpet. Memory under memory. The square squeaked a little under my shoe when I shifted my weight. He came home as the sun slid behind the building across the street, and the window went from yellow to gray. The deadbolt turned and the chair rattled against the door. I had forgotten about the chair. He pushed, stopped, and laughed, the barest breath of it, and then tapped the door. "Just a second," I said, and my voice came out normal. I moved the chair and opened the door, and he stood there with a small suitcase that matched the duffel I had seen before. He looked at the chair as if it had done this on its own, as if it had a personality he didn't care for. "Safety first," I said, and heard how stupid it sounded. "Safety," he said, and rolled his suitcase in. He smelled like a bus station, rubber, cheap soap, coffee. He washed his hands for a long time. He always did, but tonight he counted quietly under his breath. I couldn't hear the numbers, just the rhythm. He dried his hands on paper towels instead of the cloth towel. He put the paper towels in a small plastic bag, tied it, and then put that bag in the trash. He set the suitcase by his door and went straight to the closet. He slid it open, placed the suitcase inside, and slid it shut. The sound made my stomach jump. It was the sound of something designed well. It was the sound of a system that worked. After dinner, he knocked on my door. I opened it. He stood with 2 plates, each with a piece of pie. "I made dessert," he said. His voice had a small crease in it. Pride, maybe. "You bake?" I asked. I took the plate. The crust was neat. The filling looked like something from a photo in a cookbook. "I followed a recipe," he said. He watched me take a bite. The pie was good. I hated that it was good. He watched like a dentist watches your jaw after a procedure. "Good," he said when I swallowed. "I'll bring the rest to the super." "That's nice," I said, because nice is a word that floats and can mean anything. That night there was another headline. A body found near the river. The write-up was small. The facts were fewer. I closed the article before the comments. I stared at my ceiling until I started imagining faces in the uneven paint. If you stare at anything long enough, you'll find company. I moved money around in my bank app. I calculated what I'd need to break the lease. I looked at other apartments and saw the places everyone sees. Too far, too dark, too expensive, too much. I wrote an email to my boss about maybe taking a week off soon. I didn't send it. I composed a message to my parents and deleted it. I sat very still and tried to imagine saying the words out loud. My mouth wouldn't shape them. 3 days passed without incident. That's how it felt. Without incident, like a report form. Mark went about his routines. He wiped the counters. He folded his towel. He cooked, which was new. He ate and wiped the table after. He read a book about locks. I looked it up on my phone. Not a novel. a literal manual about lock mechanisms. He underlined with a ruler. On the fourth night, Talia came by with a plate of cookies, because people sometimes do what you think only people in old movies do. She stood in the doorway with the plate balanced on her palm and said, "I baked too many," and I heard myself say, "Lucky me," in a voice that sounded like a neighbor's. Mark appeared by my shoulder like a reflection. His eyes went to the cookies, then to Talia's face, then to the plant at the end of our hall, the one the super had put there that no one watered. He said, "Thank you," and took the plate. And she said, "They're almond." And he said, "I don't have allergies," in a tone like a lock clicking. She looked at me, one eyebrow lifting a fraction. I made a small face that I hoped meant, "I know," without saying anything. She left. He set the cookies on the table. He didn't eat one. I ate one. My sense of what to do had shrunk to obeying the next normal thing. Eat the cookie. Smile. Say thanks. Keep your shoes off. Don't look at the square of floor that squeaks. After midnight, I woke to a strange feeling of being in a different place even though I hadn't moved. You know that feeling? The room is yours, and not yours. The air was cooler. The sound was wrong. It took me a second to realize what it was. The building was too quiet. There is always a hum you forget to hear until it's gone. The AC was off. The fridge was off. The street noise below had hiccuped. I rolled out of bed and stepped into the hall. The hall was dark. The light the super had installed was out again, not broken, just off, as if the building had closed its eyes. I heard whispering in the kitchen, not voices, fabric, a bag rubbing against a coat, the sound of something being placed carefully on a table. Then I heard the sound I had never heard in my life inside any apartment, the peel of duct tape being pulled off a roll, slow enough to not make its usual rip. He was doing it carefully, trying to make it quiet and failing. The sound came in fits, like a slow cough. My feet carried me before my head said go. I should have stayed in my room. I should have called someone and whispered. I should have pretended to sleep. Instead, I walked down the hall, stopped at the edge of the kitchen, and looked. He stood at the table with the suitcase open. He had a pair of latex gloves on, stretched tight, the fingers too long for his fingers. Inside the suitcase were lined boxes, small, labeled A, B, C, handwritten. He had unlatched C. The box was filled with sealed plastic bags. In each bag was something that could be part of a toolbox or part of a body. I saw a length of hair, braided. I saw a ring with a dented band. I saw a cloth that could be a shirt collar. The duct tape he was peeling came from a roll of white tape, not gray, with little grid lines on the back. He set a new bag into the C box, sealed it, and pressed the air out with the side of his hand. His face did not change at all. He knew I was there. He had to know. He didn't turn. "You should be asleep," he said, not scolding, not anything. "I couldn't," I said. I heard my voice as if it belonged to the air, not to me. "It's better to sleep," he said. "You can't do anything tired." "What are you doing?" I asked. I made it a normal question, not "what the hell" or "what is that?" Just the tone you use when someone is on a ladder changing a bulb. "Packing," he said. He picked up a bag with 2 fingers and set it down in a different box. The labels didn't wobble. "I'm going to store things better." "Where?" I asked. He tapped the square of floor with his toe. The sound it made was small and private. "Down," he said, and finally turned to look at me. His eyes were calm. He was a person in a manual showing you how to accomplish a task. "You should move soon," he said. "I'm going to need more space." "I'll move," I said. The words came out fast, like pieces of food falling from a broken plate. "I'll move." "Good," he said. He peeled more tape and laid it over a seal. The tape made that sticky sigh. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. He did it the way he washed his hands. I took one step backward, then another. He watched me the way you watch a video of a person walking backward, aware of the motion and detached from it. "We're good roommates," he said. It was such a simple, absurd sentence that it cracked something in me, like a spoon cracking the sugar crust on creme brulee. "We kept it quiet," he said. "We respected the space." I nodded because nodding was the only thing I had left. Then I went to my room, picked up my backpack from the floor, put my laptop and a sweater into it, and walked back to the hall. He was still at the table, measuring, sealing, aligning. He looked up once and said, "Take the fire escape," and I did. The window gave after a push. The fire escape screamed, but in the open air the sound went thin and nobody cared. I slept on Talia's couch again, this time without any show on. The apartment felt like a small fort you make under a table as a kid, where nothing bad can find you. She woke up to get water and saw me awake and sat on the floor next to the couch with her back against it. She didn't ask. She put her hand near mine on the cushion, not touching, close enough that if I needed to grab it, I could. In the morning, I went to work like a person who goes to work. I answered emails. I made a spreadsheet. I watched a video of a dog learning to enjoy a bath. I laughed out loud at one point because my body needed to make a noise, and that was the one it came up with. I told my boss I was taking the week off starting tomorrow. He said, "Everything okay?" And I said, "Family stuff." And he said, "Okay," relieved not to have to actually help with anything. That afternoon I went back with Talia. She insisted. She said, "You're not going in there alone." And even though I didn't want to bring her into it, I also didn't want to be alone. We stood at my door. I turned the key. The living room was empty. The suitcase was gone. The table was clean. The square of floor didn't squeak. He had wiped it with something that took the sound away. The whole apartment felt like a throat that had cleared. "Your shoes," I said, and Talia rolled her eyes and kicked them off and said, "Fine," and then stuck her tongue out at me to prove she was still herself. We went straight to my room. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it. "We're getting your stuff," she said. She was all spine. "We're packing. You're staying at my place. We're calling whoever you need to call." I started pulling drawers and dumping clothes into bags. She folded without commenting on the mess. She was efficient in a way that made me want to cry. I packed my laptop, my chargers, my books, and then I stopped. I stared at my bookshelf, at the gaps where it looked like I had never owned any books at all, and felt this anger, this sudden hot anger, at the idea that I had a life, and it could be wiped clean by someone else's project, someone else's systems. I grabbed a photo of my parents at the beach, squinting into the wind, and stuck it in the bag. I took the stupid mug I liked that said "Good morning," without irony. I took the ugly sweater my aunt had knit. I took proof that I had existed in rooms before this. "Okay," Talia said, zipping the last bag. "Let's go." As we left, I saw it. A small smudge on the wall by the hall closet. A fingerprint, maybe. Oil, dirt, a moment of contact. It was nothing and everything. I reached out and touched it with my own finger. It came away clean, and the smudge looked the same. I couldn't explain why, but it helped. We made 2 trips to her apartment. On the second, when we came back up for the last bag, the hallway smelled like cleaner. The super was at the far end, mopping. He nodded at us. "Fresh," he said, like a compliment to the hall. "Somebody spilled something." "Yeah," I said. The word had too many meanings inside it. Inside our place, there was a note on the table, written in the same careful black marker he used to label everything. It said, "Please leave your key on the counter when you go. Thank you," below it. A small smiley face. Not cute. Round, correct, 2 dots, 1 arc. "Jesus," Talia said. "What is wrong with that guy?" I put my key next to the note. My hand shook, but not because of fear. It shook because keys make a sound when you put them down. The sound was mine. I made it. It rang in the room before dying. We left. We went to her place. I shut her door and slid the chain and felt the chain sit in its track, a piece of metal that understood its job. We opened a bottle of wine that tasted like vinegar and didn't care. We ordered noodles. We ate from the containers on the floor and laughed at how bad the wine was and how good the noodles were. Then she went to brush her teeth, and I stood by her window and looked at the building across from us. And in the reflection, I saw my own face. And behind it, floating, my apartment hallway like an overlay. I slept like a hunted animal, sudden, tight, then up again, then down. In the early gray, I dreamed I was standing in the hair salon below our old place, and the women in smocks were sweeping hair into neat piles, and each pile had a name card stuck in it like a grave. They asked me which pile I wanted, and I said, "None," and they laughed and said, "Then why are you here?" I woke with my heart pounding against the inside of my ribs like fists on a door. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Don't forget the electric bill." Then, a second later, "And the water." Then, after a pause, "And the Wi-Fi." The practical matters after a life. I stared at the messages until the screen went dark. I didn't go back. The decision was the only clean thing I had. I told the super I was moving out. He shrugged in the way that meant, "Things happen," and said he'd have to talk to the landlord. I said, "Talk to him," and left before he could tell me not to. A day passed, then another. My stuff made a new kind of clutter in Talia's place. She didn't complain. She made coffee and left me half. She went to work. I walked around without purpose, like I had at the beginning, only now I noticed every sound. The brake squeal of the bus, the rattle of a bike chain, the hum of the traffic light control box. I wanted to stand next to the control box forever. It made a comfortingly dumb noise. On the 3rd night, I got another text from Mark. "You forgot your lease copy. I can slide it under Talia's door." I went cold at the fact of him using her name. He hadn't met her more than twice. He shouldn't have known her last name to find her door. He also shouldn't have known I was staying there unless he had watched me carry bags, or the super had told him, or the building itself had whispered. I typed, "Leave it with the super." He sent back a thumbs up emoji. It was the first time he had used a picture in any message. It felt obscene. Talia came home late and dropped her bag and said, "They found another one." She said it the way people say, "It's starting to rain," hoping it won't. We sat at her tiny table and read the article on my phone together, our heads close, the light making a bright oval. The details were not details. The police had no suspects. They told people to be careful. They set up a tip line. A woman at a nearby diner said she had seen a man carrying a suitcase into the woods and had thought, "That's a heavy suitcase to take for a walk." I got up and went to the sink and turned on the water and let it run until it steamed. I washed a plate that wasn't dirty. Talia watched me and said very quietly, "We should go to the police." "I know," I said. "I know." "Not just because of this," she said. "Because of you." I nodded. My hands were in the hot water. They were red up to the wrist, like I had dipped them in paint. I shut off the tap and leaned on the counter. "I saw," I said, and the word stuck. I swallowed, and when it came out small. "A hand," I said. "In his closet. In a bag." She didn't flinch. She didn't say, "Are you sure?" She closed her eyes for a second and opened them and said, "Okay." Then she stood, took a breath like she was stepping off a dock and said, "Get your coat." We went to the precinct like people go to the post office. There were posters of missing faces on the wall. The man at the desk had the face of someone who has heard everything. I said I wanted to make a report. He nodded and handed me a pen. The pen wrote like it was running through mud. I wrote my name and my old address and said the sentence. I saw what looked like a human hand inside a bag in my roommate's closet. When I looked up, the man at the desk was watching my mouth like it could tell him more. He asked me to sit. He brought another officer who brought a third. They asked questions. I answered until I started to feel like a tape recorder. "What did you smell?" one of them asked, and I said, "Sweet." And he wrote "sweet," as if that would hold up in a room later. And maybe it would. Maybe that word had a place in official life. They went to the building. They asked us to wait. We sat on a plastic bench under the poster of a boy with a hockey stick smile. The clock on the wall didn't have hands. It was digital and blinked. Time did its stretch taffy thing. The officers came back. They said they had knocked and my roommate had let them in, and they hadn't found anything in the closet. They said the apartment looked very neat. They said he was cooperative. They asked if I was sure. I said, "Yes," in a voice as clear as I could make it. I didn't add, "I'm not an idiot," or "I know what a hand looks like," or "He had time to move it," or "Check the square of floor," because the square of floor felt like a thing a hysterical person would say. I said, "I don't feel safe returning there." They offered a list of shelters. I said I had a place to stay. They gave me a card with a number to call if I remembered more. They wrote the words, "follow up," and "call back," an incident, on a piece of paper and stamped it. We walked out into the street. The air tasted like rain that wasn't there. Talia squeezed my shoulder and said, "You did it." I didn't feel like I had done anything. I felt like I had thrown a stone into a well and was waiting for the sound. That night, a note slid under Talia's door. Not from the police. From Mark. He wrote in the same steady hand. "I don't like people who talk." No signature. No smiley face. Just that. A statement. Not a threat. Not a promise. Something worse, maybe. A preference. Talia held the paper with her fingertips, like it could bite. We should go somewhere else, she said. A hotel. It won't matter, I said. If he wants to find me, he can find me. Saying it out loud made me angry in a way I could use. He knows everything, I said. He knows the square squeaked and then it didn't. He knows the super's ladder has a wobbly leg. He knows which seat on the bus people avoid because it smells like vomit once. He knows all the little things because no one else wants to. What do you know? She asked me, not unkindly. I swallowed. I know his systems, I said. I know he keeps rope in the closet and tapes the bags and washes his hands for longer than necessary. I know he will make it about rules. I know he thinks we were good roommates. The word "we" hurt. She nodded. Then we used that. She went to her kitchen drawer and pulled out a pad of paper. We make our own system. We wrote everything we could remember. We drew the square of the apartment. We marked the place in the hall where the floorboard creaked and where it didn't anymore. We noted the times he left, the times he returned. We listed the packages. We listed the smells. We wrote down the small laugh he had given when the chair blocked the door. We wrote down the suitcase and the clear bin and the gloves. We wrote down the clean square of floor. We wrote, in big letters, hand in bag, and then drew a box around it, so we wouldn't try to soften it with other words. We made a list of things you could dismantle with a screwdriver. We wrote the super's name and question marks around it. We wrote ladder and light and hair salon. We wrote Talia's plant, because it had touched him, and he had hated that. When we were done, the page was full. It looked like the kind of page you fill in the middle of the night when you're trying to solve a puzzle that doesn't exist. But looking at it made me feel less like a person the air could move. We took the paper to the police the next day. We asked for someone else. We asked for anyone who would listen. We got a woman with a tired ponytail who had the face of a person who has had enough of men's systems. We told her everything. She asked better questions. She said they would look at the building again. She didn't promise anything. She said, "You were brave to leave." And I didn't believe her. But it was good to hear someone say it as if it were true. When we got back to Talia's, her plant was on the floor. It had been on the table by the window. The pot was ceramic and cracked in a clean line like an egg. Dirt was everywhere. There was a note next to it. "Watch your step." Talia inhaled sharp through her nose, a sound like a match. She bent and set the plant back upright, cradling the cracked pot. She didn't cry. She pressed the soil back around the roots. I picked up the note with a napkin and put it in a plastic bag because that's what people do in shows when they want fingerprints, even though I knew he would have worn gloves. We didn't call the police about the plant. It felt like handing them a joke. Instead, we taped the pot together. We gave the plant more water than we should have. We sat on the floor and ate cold noodles and stared at the door like it might start moving on its own. We slept in shifts without saying we were sleeping in shifts. When I woke from my half-sleep, she was sitting cross-legged by the door with a book upside down in her lap. In the morning, there was another note, slid under the door while we were awake and didn't hear it. "You left your charger." I almost laughed at how small the message was, how ordinary. Bullying with errands. I said, "He's telling us he can get close." And Talia said, "We know." and then we said nothing for a long time. I didn't go back for the charger. I bought a new one at the drugstore for too much money. The cashier wished me a nice day in a voice that had seen too many not nice days. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a photo from an unknown number. Not Mark this time. The super. He had my number because of the lease. He had sent a picture of our apartment door with the lock plate removed. The screws were in a neat line on the floor. He wrote, "Fixing." The picture made me nauseous for reasons I couldn't explain. The door looked surgical. I texted back, "Thanks." He wrote. He asked, "Door sticks?" I stared at the message until the words stopped meaning things. He asked. Of course he asked. The super fixed things when asked. He didn't know the square floor was a door to something else. He didn't know he was opening more than a lock. At night, the city made the kind of noise that helps you sleep, because it tells you everything else is alive. I dozed with the window cracked. Sometime before the light changed, I dreamed I was back on the fire escape, looking at our kitchen, and Mark was at the table with the suitcase and the boxes, and he looked up and smiled at me with all his teeth, and his teeth had little numbers etched into them, and he pointed at each tooth and said, A, B, C, and I woke up with my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I rolled over. The wall felt too close. The room had shifted from safe to small. I stood and went to the kitchen for water. The plant on the table lifted its leaves toward me like a hand. I stopped and put my palm under one leaf and it settled there. And I stood there like an idiot with my hand holding a leaf up in the dark, thinking about the square of floor, thinking about the sound of tape, thinking about the way he had said, "We kept it quiet," and feeling an anger rise that felt clean. I don't know if people are born sadists or make themselves that way. Mark liked systems. He liked neatness. He liked what rules gave him cover. He liked the way people like me will swallow things to keep the peace. He liked the careful smile he could put on like a shirt. I stood in Talia's kitchen and realized a thing I had been avoiding. I had been a good roommate. I had leaned into it. I had respected the space. I had kept it quiet. I had told myself quiet was safety, when quiet was just a different word for alone. The next morning, the police called. The woman with the ponytail. She said they wanted to look again. They wanted to bring dogs. They wanted to talk to the super. They wanted to check the basement. They wanted to check the hair salon access. She didn't say why the shift. She didn't say if someone else had come forward. She didn't say if a pattern had finally looked like a pattern to someone who decides what patterns count. I said I would meet them there. Talia said, "I'm coming." And she said it like a person who has touched a cracked pot and pressed the pieces back together and will not let anyone step on it. We put on our coats. We tied our shoes tight. We walked down the stairs and out into the morning, and the air tasted like the first sip of water after a long hold. We turned the corner to our building and saw the police car and the van and the yellow tape not across our door, but coiled on the hood like a warning waiting to be used. The super stood in the hall with his ladder set up under the light, the same way I had seen him the first week, as if nothing had happened, as if this was a maintenance call. He raised his eyebrows at us in a question that had no mark at the end. The woman officer nodded to me. She was holding a clipboard. The dogs whined, the sharp breaths of animals who know work is coming. She looked at the door to our apartment and then at me and said, "Ready?" Like we were going into a meeting. I put my key down on the counter yesterday. I didn't have a way in anymore. Mark opened the door from the inside. He stood there with that calm face and said, "Can I help you?" in a voice that was nothing but surface. The officer showed him the paper that lets people into your life whether you want them there or not. He read it like a pamphlet. He stepped aside. He held the door. He did not smile. He watched me the way a teacher watches a student take a test, he wrote. The dogs went first. They went to the hall. They went to the closet. They went to the kitchen. They pawed the square of floor and then sat, looking up as if they had done a trick and were waiting for a treat. One of them whined. The officer with the ponytail looked at the floor and then at Mark and said his name and then said, "What's under there?" And he said, "Storage." And she said, "Open it." And he said, "It's sealed." And she said, "Open it." Again, without moving her face. The super brought his tool bag. He knelt. He pried. The square squeaked once, a polite sound, and then lifted. The smell came up like a memory you had drowned, and it swam anyway. I didn't look. I didn't need to. The officer looked. The dog whined again and put its head in its handler's lap like it had done something wrong by finding what it was supposed to find. The super stood up very slowly. Mark watched the hole as if it were a TV he had never seen before. His face didn't change. He said, as if reciting, "I like things neat." The officer said, "Turn around." And he did. And he put his hands behind his back in that same calm, obedient way. And when the cuffs clicked, he flinched for the first time, a small jerk like a person hearing a sound he didn't control. He looked at me then, and his eyes were nothing. Not anger, not fear, not anything. He nodded once to himself, maybe, or to me, or to the idea of the system working even when it was against him. Then he said very softly, "You were a good roommate." I felt something hot rise in my throat. I swallowed it. I thought of the pie. I thought of the taped pot. I thought of the hand in the bag. I thought of Talia's hand near mine on the couch. I thought of the square opening with that small, polite squeak like a person clearing their throat. The apartment, suddenly full of voices that weren't ours, started to feel like a room again, like a place you could breathe. They led him past us. He didn't look at Talia. He didn't look at the super. He looked at the hall light, as if seeing how the new fixture had been installed. Outside, the salon women stood at their back door, hands over their mouths, eyes wide. One of them said, muffled, "I knew I smelled something." And the other hit her shoulder lightly like you do when you don't want to say what's in your mouth. People gathered, heads tilted. Phones came up. The dogs panted. The world did its relentless thing. Inside, the officers did the rest of the work. They measured. They bagged. They noted. They stepped. They opened the closet. They named the items. They spoke in numbers and letters. They peeled tape slow and fast. They were part of a different system that, for once, felt like something you could believe in without pretending. I stood at the table and put my hand on the wood and felt my palms stick to a spot I had cleaned 100 times. I looked at the square, open like a mouth, and I did not look down. I looked at the wall and the plant in the hall, and the scuffed baseboard where my suitcase had knocked the first day I moved in. I looked at the space where my key had sat. There's more to tell. Of course there is. There's what they found, and who, and the names that were names again instead of labels and bags. There's the part where you go home with Talia, and you sit on the floor, and the plant leans toward the light, and you cry without noise, because noise feels like giving him something. There's the part where you tell your parents, and they say, "Oh my God," over and over, like they are trying to open a door with the wrong key. There's the part where the reporters leave a note too, asking you to talk, and you don't. There's the part where the super cleans the hall and hums, and the new light flickers once, and then holds. But that was the day the system broke in my favor. That was the day I stopped being neat for someone else. That was the day I learned the difference between quiet and silence. Quiet is what they ask for. Silence is what they take. I stood in my old apartment and breathed out for so long it felt like I was emptying an old room, one box at a time. And then the phone on the counter buzzed, and for a second, I thought it was mine. For a second, I let myself think the sound belonged to me, and then I saw it. His phone, still on the counter, vibrating with a new message that lit up the screen. The officer picked it up with 2 fingers. The screen showed a short text from an unknown number. "Drop at the river tonight." Then, a second later, "Same place." The officer looked at me, and then at the open square in the floor, and then at the door where they had just taken him, and she said, "We're not done." Number. We weren't. They took him away, but the apartment didn't let go. The square in the kitchen stayed open like a mouth as people in gloves climbed in and out. They carried things up in bags. They said names under their breath the way nurses check charts. The woman with the ponytail told me to wait in the hall. Talia stood with me and squeezed my arm so hard it hurt, and I didn't ask her to stop. They found more than I can carry into words. You know how sometimes you open a drawer and find something you forgot you owned, and for a second it's like seeing your old self wave from another room. Now flip that. They pulled up what he had stored and labeled. The labels were precise. A, B, C, like on the boxes in his suitcase, only bigger. The officers stopped using words like article and item. They started saying evidence, and then they started using names when they had them. The dogs lay down after a while, tongues out, the way tired dogs look proud and sorry at the same time. They took his phone. It buzzed again where the officer had set it down. "Drop at the river tonight?" "Same place." The officer looked at me. I looked at the open square. I told myself that meant someone else existed who liked the same systems Mark liked. The thought made the hallway suddenly too narrow. "Do you know whose number that is?" she asked. I shook my head. He never talked about anyone. He didn't have friends over. She nodded, like that was what she'd expected. "We'll trace it." I slept at Talia's that night. Sleep is a generous word for what my body did. I lay on her couch while the plant leaned toward the window, and I counted how many times the refrigerator turned on. I was halfway under before the banging woke me. Not loud, careful. 3 even knocks like a rhythm exercise. Talia was already up, standing by the door with her phone in her hand. The voice came through the door. "Police." The officer with the ponytail. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, and hated the part of me that had already learned to distrust every sound. "We traced the number," she said when we opened up. "It's a burner." It pinged in a cluster near the river, close to the path behind the warehouses. It's gone now. We're going to look. You think he wasn't working alone? I said. She made a face that said yes without saying yes. Sometimes systems need two pairs of hands. I want to come, I said, and she started to say no. I cut in. He knows me. If whoever texted is checking, he'll expect a reply from the phone. I can write like him, flat and neat. I can ask a question that sounds like him. You can watch. You can tell me exactly what to type. She looked at me like she was checking if I was asking to be brave or asking to be punished. You don't owe us this, she said. You don't owe him anything. I know, I said. I still want to help. She weighed that. Finally, you'll do it in the car. You won't leave the car unless I tell you. We drove with the radio off, just the low talking of the tires. Talia came too, in the back seat, holding my backpack like it could help. The officer gave me the phone in an evidence bag with the top open so I could touch the screen without smearing the bag. She told me exactly what to write. Not tonight. Heat, I typed. The reply came fast. Got it. Tomorrow. I looked at her. She nodded. Tomorrow, I typed. Usual time, the phone answered. Bring B. The officer raised her eyebrows. B. Box B, I said, before my brain could guard my mouth. He had A, B, C. Okay, she said, and her pen moved. Reply. B is light. A is better. I typed it. The dots pulsed. A then, the phone wrote. East lot. No headlights. She nodded to the officer driving. We'll cover that lot, she said. We'll cover the road to it. We'll cover the river path. If they move earlier, we move earlier. She took the phone back and sealed the bag. You don't need to be there tomorrow, she said to me. In fact, I'd prefer you weren't. I won't be, I said, and I meant it. The idea of waiting in the dark while someone came for a labeled box made my stomach crawl. We went home. Home was a new word. It meant Talia's couch and my backpack on the floor, and a plant with a taped pot that kept trying. We ate toast and pretended it was a meal. We didn't talk about the river. We talked about what we'd do when I found a new place. She said I should find somewhere with a window that looked at a tree. I said I didn't care about trees. She said I would. The next day they called with updates I only half heard. They were going to the lot early. They would watch. They would not engage until it was safe. They would bring people who could follow without being seen. The woman with the ponytail told me to keep my phone near me. I did. Every vibration made my heart trip. Late afternoon, the phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number that wasn't the burner. The hair salon texted a building group thread I didn't know I was in. FYI, we are closing early today. The super wrote a thumbs up. A man in 3C wrote a joke about finally getting a quiet night. No one replied. I stared at the super's name until it blurred. Mark had liked the super. Not liked like friends. Liked like tools. You like a screwdriver. You like a ladder that doesn't wobble. You like a man who will fix a door if you ask. I thought about the picture of the bare lock, screws in a straight line. I thought about the note that said, "Watch your step," and how the super always said he hated people who scuffed the floors. I thought about how information moves through a building, not like news, but like water in old pipes. I thought about who knew what before I did. When night came, the officer texted, "We're in position." I typed "okay" and put my phone face down and pressed my thumb hard into the table until it hurt. Talia sat cross-legged on the floor and sorted through a small pile of her own mail as if it could shield us. I tried to read the same sentence 3 times and failed each time. The plant made its quiet plant noises, the little clicks of leaves adjusting. The phone lit up again, but it wasn't the officer. It was a number with no name. "Don't be clever." I read it out loud. Talia looked up, eyes sharp. We waited. Another message. "You don't plan drops through a parade." Then, "You gave them A, B, C, sloppy." I didn't realize I was cold until my teeth clicked. I texted the officer. "New number just came in." I copied the messages. She wrote back one word. "Stay." I stared at the new number. It wasn't the supers. It wasn't anyone I had saved. The dots came up again. "I like the pie," the message said. "Too sweet." He didn't have his phone. He was in a cell. Someone else was writing to me with his voice. "Salon," Talia whispered. I shook my head. The tone wasn't theirs. The tone was neat. The tone was a person who oils hinges. The tone was someone who prefers tape that leaves no residue. The phone buzzed again, and this time there was an image. Not our apartment, not the river. The photo showed a different hallway, a door with peeling paint, a pair of shoes next to a mat that said, "Welcome with the E broken." Below the shoes, an envelope. My name on it. The handwriting was his. "Friendly neighbors," the message said. "Always helpful. Building people are the best people." I stood without meaning to. Talia stood too. "Whose door is that?" she asked. I didn't know. I looked at the envelope in the photo and tried to read the address. The picture was too close. The doormat could have been any cheap mat in the city. The shoes were worn at the heel, the way a person wears shoes when they put weight on the inside of their feet. I had seen those shoes once, on the stairs, when a man passed me and said, "New here?" without stopping. 4B maybe. 5A. My memory felt like a hand groping in a dark drawer. The officer texted, "We have movement." A second message. "Stay put." The unknown number sent one more line. "Don't unlock any doors." I didn't. I locked ours and chained it and slid the table against it, because the part of me that understood systems understood this one. Doors, hinges, levers, lines of sight. We turned off the lights. We sat on the floor on either side of the door. We waited, the way animals wait when they hear the first crunch of leaves. The night did its endless thing. The officer didn't text for an hour that felt like 2. When she did, the words were short. We got him. Then, not him. Then, a him. I called. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice had a new layer, the flat sound people get when they are managing the spill of something too large. "We grabbed a man at the lot," she said. "He had a box." He didn't have Mark's phone, but he had a list with letters. He ran. He didn't run fast. He isn't the only one. He said there was always a pickup guy and a house guy. House guy stacked and labeled. Pickup guy delivered. Sometimes there was a third man who found the house. Sometimes the house guy found the house, and the third man kept the path clean. He wouldn't use names. He liked words like team and roles. He's talking now because he thinks he's the smallest cog. We'll see. I told her about the photo, the envelope, my name. She listened. "We'll sweep your building tonight," she said. "If there's a note, don't touch it. Don't open the door. Don't do anything." "Okay," I said. "What about the super?" She was quiet for a beat too long. "We're talking to him," she said. "He says he didn't know anything." "He knows the doors and the lights," I said. "He knows who's out of town and when the elevator groans and which lock plates strip. He knows what we call when we call it nothing." "We're talking to him," she said again. "Stay put." We stayed put. We learned to hear our own blood. Around dawn, someone slid something under the door. Soft, careful. The chain kept the door from opening more than a hand's width, but the gap was enough. I waited until the light had turned gray, then moved the table with Talia, inch by inch, so it wouldn't scrape and betray us. I crouched, looked through the chain gap, and saw a plain white envelope on the floor. My name, again. The straight black letters that made me feel like I was back at the fridge reading a rule. I used the broom to pull it close. I didn't touch it. I took a photo and sent it to the officer. She wrote back, "Wait." They came fast. They gloved up. They bagged the envelope like it was a baby bird that might break. They said they'd let me know. I didn't expect they actually would. But an hour later, the officer called. Her voice had a new tightness, the kind that is not fear, but effort. "It's an apartment key," she said. "Your old one. The one you left on the counter." "Of course," I said. I wanted to laugh. "Why?" "To tell you he can still find you," she said. "Or to get you to come find him. Or both." "It's not him," I said. "He's in a cell." "Systems remain when the person is gone," she said. "Someone else is trying on the voice." I looked at Talia. She was watching me, jaw set. "Then we cut the system," I said. "We cut the path." The day dragged and snapped. I went to the bathroom and threw up quietly, and then scrubbed the sink like a mad person. Talia heated soup and we ate it standing up. My hands shook and then steadied. The officer texted updates in blocks. They had the pickup man in a room. He was naming lots and nights and payment. He was trying to paint himself as dumb labor. He was smart enough to know dumb labor sometimes walks. He had names that were probably fakes, and a story about a bar near the ring road where people like to talk about rules. By late afternoon, they asked me to come to the precinct again. They wanted me to look at a photo lineup. I said yes. I felt like something brittle that moves without bending. We sat in a small room with buzzing lights. The officer laid the photos out. I pointed to one. The man with the inside-worn shoes. The one who had said "new here" on the stairs weeks ago and kept walking. She didn't tell me if I was right. She wrote something down, then took the photos away like they were cards in a magic trick. Before we left, I asked for 5 minutes to see him. Mark. It was a stupid ask. The officer stared at me, then at the wall clock, then back at me. She said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I want him to see me not flinch." And she must have believed me because she said, 2 minutes, and led me down a hall that smelled like old coffee and damp paper. He sat at a table in a small room with a window that wasn't a window. His hands were flat on the metal. He looked up when the door opened. He had a bruise on his cheekbone, not purple yet, the yellow of something about to bloom. He smiled when he saw me, not big, the small smile he had used when he said the word quiet. "I told you to move," he said. "I did," I said. "The square is open." He tilted his head, interested. "They like that," he said. "They like it when things open clean." "They got one of your friends last night," I said. "He wasn't fast." Mark nodded like he was taking a note in his head. "Pickup guy," he said. "Pickup guys are a dime a dozen. House guys are rare." "You aren't rare," I said. "You're just practiced." He smiled again, a little wider. "You were very good at the rules," he said. "That helped." "I know," I said. That was the hardest part, saying that and not looking at my shoes. "It won't help you now." He looked past me at the window that wasn't. "It helps someone," he said. "It always helps someone." The officer touched my elbow. "Time." I stood. He leaned forward a fraction, like a person smelling something they like. "You'll never like noise," he said, like a promise. "You'll always choose quiet." "I'll choose people," I said. "Even when they make noise." He blinked, the first break in his face. I left before he could arrange himself again. Outside, the air tasted like wet concrete. Talia was waiting on the steps. We walked back slowly, not because we were tired, but because walking fast felt like chasing something we didn't want. At her building, the hall smelled like someone's dinner and bleach. A new note was on the board near the mailboxes. "Please double-check you've locked your doors." Break-ins reported nearby. The super had signed it with his small, tidy initials. His ladder leaned against the wall. The leg was taped where it had wobbled. He came out of the utility closet as we were reading the note. He smiled. His shoulders did that permanent shrug. "Busy day," he said. "Police came by?" I asked. He shrugged again. "They ask questions. I answer. I don't know what people do behind doors." He pointed at the note. "Lock your door." "We do," Talia said. He nodded. His eyes slid over us the way water slides over a plate you haven't rinsed well. He went back into the closet. The door shut gently. I realized all at once that I didn't know his last name. Upstairs we sat. We didn't turn on the TV. I let the hours move. I didn't check the time. I didn't need to. The day got tired and lay down. The dead don't care about clocks, and now I understood that the living don't either when they're scared. The officer called close to dark. "Pickup guy gave us a new lot," she said. "He says there's a drop tonight. He says if there isn't, there will be soon. He says there is a storage unit in a facility by the ring road. They move pieces through it. The lease is in a fake name. The card is real. We're working the path." "Do you need me?" I asked, hating how eager I sounded, a dog with a job. "No," she said. "If anything, you need you. Stay where you are. Stay with your friend. If someone knocks, don't open. If someone slides a note, text me. We'll sit in the dark. We're getting good at it." We followed orders. The night shuddered and kept going. Around the time the building settles deeper onto itself, we heard footsteps pause outside our door. A body leaned close to the peephole. We didn't breathe. The person on the other side didn't knock. They waited long enough for us to count to 50 in our heads. Then they moved on. A door farther down opened and shut. The sound was an old sound in that hall. It made me want to throw up and lie down and sleep all at once. "Which apartment is 4B?" I whispered. "2 floors up, other side," Talia whispered back. "The guy with the thin hair. The one who always asks if you're using the dryer even when you're not." We sat on the floor until our legs went numb. At some point I must have slept sitting up, because I woke to morning light folded into the entryway and my back complaining. My phone buzzed. The officer. "Unit found. Locked. Warrant in process." Another buzz. "He isn't the brains. He isn't the hands. He's the road." I pictured roads. I pictured the ways people carry weight for others and tell themselves it's just a job. I pictured the clean square in the kitchen and the duct tape with the grid on the back and the way Mark pressed the air out of bags with the side of his hand. That afternoon the officer called and didn't sound tired for once. "We opened the unit," she said. "It's a library of tidy sins. The labels match what we pulled from your floor. We have enough to carry this all the way." There were prints. There were numbers in a ledger. There were drawings of hallways with measurements. We have copies. We have names. We don't have every name, but we have enough. "Whose ledger?" I asked. "Pickup guy's handwriting on some pages," she said. "Someone else's on others. Neat, straight, like a schoolboy." "A house guy," I said. "A house guy," she agreed. "More than one over the years. But yours, your Mark, he was a star student." I didn't feel relief. I felt a kind of empty that wasn't hunger, a hole where the system had been in my head. I didn't trust it being gone. I waited for it to edge back in like a draft. We went back to my old apartment once, with officers during daylight. They were done with the square. It was closed again, not sealed with anything heavy, just shut. They had taken what needed taking. They had left a smell that was almost medical. The blinds were open for the first time since I'd lived there. The air looked different in the light. It was bare. It was boring. The plant in the hall was still alive, because somebody had finally watered it. The super had put a saucer under it to catch drips. My room was empty. I had taken myself out of it. The kitchen table had the marks of feet where people had stood to reach the ceiling fixture. Someone had left a small square of blue tape on the wall with nothing written on it. It made me want to cry for no good reason. On the counter was a clear evidence bag with my old key inside. The officer handed it to me. "You don't need it," she said. "But it's yours." I slid it into my pocket and felt its little weight like a coin. I looked at the place I had washed dishes, and the place he had sealed bags, and the chair that had once kept the door from opening, and I realized I was waiting for him to come around a corner and tell me to take off my shoes. He didn't. He never would again. The trial didn't happen for a long time. I moved. I found a place with a window that looked at a tree because Talia insisted on helping me look until I agreed. I bought a cheap rug and threw away the packaging without folding it. I left a spoon on the counter overnight on purpose and woke up to it and didn't apologize to anyone. I learned what my new building sounded like when it slept. I introduced myself to the neighbor with the dog and learned the dog's name before the neighbor's. I kept the plant and its taped pot. It thrived in the new light like nothing bad had ever happened to it. Sometimes a smell would reach me from the street, a hot, sweet rot from the trash truck, and my vision would go narrow and the floor would tilt. Sometimes a door in a different hallway would click twice, and I would think of the deadbolt turning and turning. Sometimes I would catch myself listening too hard to my new roommate's footsteps. She was a nurse who worked odd shifts and liked loud music that she turned down when I knocked and asked. I apologized the second time I asked. "You don't need to be neat for me," she said, not unkind. "You just need to be real." I watched the news when I could stand it. They showed drawings of boxes and lists and squares and storage units and tried to explain the way a person can turn cruelty into a filing system and make it look like a job. They showed a photo of Mark that the landlord must have dug up from an application. Gray shirt tucked in, belt on, standing straight, eyes flat. They showed a picture of the pickup guy in a jacket that didn't fit. They showed the super's face once, walking fast to his car, eyes down, and the caption said, "No comment." The police said he wasn't charged. He had known the building too well, and the people not at all. When the trial finally came, I went. I sat in the second row and folded my hands in my lap and didn't look at him until I was ready. I told the truth when they asked. I told it in the same straightforward way I'm telling it now, because the truth didn't need help. I said "hand in a bag" out loud in a room with people whose job it was to hear it. I said "square in the kitchen," and labels, and rope, and tape with grid lines, and I moved, and I called, and he said we were good roommates. The defense asked what time of night I saw what I saw. I said I didn't check and I didn't pretend I had. They asked why I had gone into his room that first time. I said the laundry bag had ripped. They asked if I had touched anything. I said the toolbox. And then I made myself say, "and the closet door," because we were done being neat. He watched me like a person watches someone else reading a manual wrong. He didn't blink any more than he used to. He didn't frown. He didn't take notes. When our eyes met, he didn't smirk and he didn't flinch. He was a blank wall with a lock behind it. The jury looked at him the way people look at a bug that might be a leaf. They convicted him. Not because of me alone. Because of the open square and the boxes and the ledger, and the man at the river who had kept names in his head like tools in a bag, and finally dropped them when someone squeezed. Because of the numbers on the card, and the grain of tape, and the hair that matched a head the family had kissed. Because neatness can be read when you know what letters to look for. After outside, Talia cried in a way that made other people cry. The honest kind that climbs out and sits on the curb next to you. I didn't. I stood with my hands in my coat pockets and felt the old key and the new one press together and make a small weight against my palm. A reporter asked for a comment and I said no. A woman I had never met hugged me hard and whispered, "Thank you." And I didn't know which of us she was thanking. Life didn't return to normal because normal isn't a place you get to again. It went forward. It learned new corners. I worked. I slept mostly. I ate. I learned where the light in my new kitchen makes a square on the floor in the afternoon and how to step in it and feel warm. I stopped checking if the hall light was out. I watered the plant. It split a new leaf, which looked like a hand raised from behind a couch. One night, I came home and found an envelope leaning against my door. Plain white. My name neat on the front. My heart dropped like a glass into a sink. I stood there and tasted metal, and almost turned around and went someplace with other people. Then I bent and picked it up. My fingers left smudges. The handwriting this time was not his. It was rounder, messier, the way a person writes when they are using their non-dominant hand. Inside was a square of blue painter's tape, nothing written on it. I called the officer before I called anyone else. She came herself, which told me they took it seriously. She bagged the envelope and the tape. She looked at the handwriting and didn't say anything. "We may never know if this is a cruel joke or a signal," she said. "You know that. People hear a story and some of them want to wear it. Some of them want to tell you they can reach you. Some of them want to see if you'll flinch." "I didn't," I said. "Not yet." "Good," she said. "But keep your lights up. Keep your locks locked. Keep your friends close." I did. I told Talia. She came over with cheap wine and good noodles, and we sat on my new rug and watched the stupidest show we could find. We laughed at the wrong parts, and it still counted. When she left, she put her hand on my shoulder at the door and looked at me the way you check a pot on the stove. Not because you don't trust it, but because you care about what's inside. I still think about the phrase he used that first day. "I like quiet." It turns out quiet isn't a virtue on its own. It's a tool. You can use it to pay attention to the people you love when they tell you what hurts. You can use it to hear the click of a lock that shouldn't be clicking. You can use it to make a room where someone tired can sleep. Or you can use it to turn a place into a box where only your rules matter, and you tape up what you don't want to look at, and label it, and slide it under the floor. I don't owe quiet to men like him anymore. I owe it to myself, and to Talia, and to the people whose names came back because a square opened. I owe it to the plant that kept growing with a cracked pot, and to the dog down the hall that thumps its tail against the door when it hears me coming, and then barks too loud, because Joy doesn't know how to be polite. I owe it to the woman at the precinct with the ponytail, who didn't promise anything and delivered everything she could. Sometimes, late, I hear measured footsteps in my building and my chest fills with old air. I put a hand on the wall until the feeling passes. I step into the square of light on my kitchen floor and stand there until my breathing slows. I look at the tree outside and count the leaves it has left. I let the quiet be what it is. Not a rule, not an order, not a cage. Just the space between one breath and the next. You wanted the worst of it. You wanted the brutal part. Here it is, as plainly as I can say it. What made the murders brutal wasn't only what he did to their bodies. It was what he did to the world around them. He turned rooms into diagrams and people into pieces and silence into a lid. He made a system out of cruelty, and he counted on the rest of us to help without knowing we were helping. He counted on neighbors and supers and delivery schedules, and the fact that I would rather fix a laundry hook than admit I had opened a door I shouldn't have opened. He counted on how often we choose neat over true. He was wrong about one thing. He thought the system would hold. He forgot about dogs that sit when the scent hits. He forgot about a woman with a taped pot who won't let a plant die because a note told her to watch her step. He forgot that quiet can crack. And when it does, the sound brings people running. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I think about the square opening with that tiny, polite squeak, and I hear a different sound layered under it, the one the dog made when it put its head in the handler's lap. That small, sorry sound of a creature who knows it did the right thing and wishes it didn't have to. I let myself cry then, not loud, but not hidden. I fill the room with something that belongs to me. The last thing he said to me through the glass in that room was about what I would always choose. He was sure of it. He had built a life on being sure. He's wrong. I will choose noise when it keeps my people alive. I will choose talking. I will choose the ugly clatter of keys thrown into a bowl on purpose. I will choose footsteps that creak. I will choose the knock that comes with a name. I will choose the dog barking at nothing, and the neighbor playing drums offbeat, and the plant knocking its leaf against the window, because it wants more light. I will choose whatever keeps someone from sliding another note under another door in a hallway that smells like bleach and hair and old heat, and calling that safety. He liked neat. I like open. I like the square closed now, not because we agreed to keep it that way, but because someone pried it up and looked, and looking made all the difference. And now there's a steel plate over it that no one can lift without a tool, and plenty of us know where the tool is and how to use it, and none of us will let one person hold the instructions again.